Hello, this is National Divorce Talk Raw with your host, Marc Ruiz Evans. We'll try to make it a little bit fun, but the subject is difficult and depressing. Sorry, nature of the beast. But we want to make sure that you're informed. Nobody really does a good job of making sure to cover the topic well. I've been doing it since 2012 and am the preeminent expert on secession and political divorce in North America. Not by will, it just sort of seemed to happen on the strange journey of my life. Anyways, let's get right into it. Here's what we're going to talk about today. The first article is going to be from MSNBC. How likely is a new U.S. civil war? From the Mehdi Hasan show on January 5th, 2022. We're going to cover about 5 articles today, going at the end of December into the beginning of January. I know the articles are a little bit old. They're a few weeks old, but it's a collection of articles from roughly the same sources on roughly the same narrative, and we're going to look at what the system wanted to talk about with this conversation of national divorce, and we're also going to pick apart a lot of the misinformation that they gave. So we're going to show you what the sources are, we're going to show you what they said, and we're going to confirm on what they said was accurate and what they said that was inaccurate, with additional sources coming from that. And of course, sources will also be provided in the description. Nobody does as thorough a job reviewing the news on this sensitive subject as I do in America. So here's the first thing we want to cover is how likely is a new U.S. civil war on the Mehdi Hasan show, January 5th, 2022.
Yemen, Iraq, Ukraine, and the former Yugoslavia have in common. They're all places that have recently suffered through some of the worst civil wars in modern history. Violent upheavals that have ultimately killed or displaced millions of people, while most Americans have watched from afar. But a political scientist who has studied those civil wars and been to many of those countries says that the United States is now on a path to joining them.
We've covered that before, and we'll cover that a little bit more. But basically, what they're talking about is there's a CIA analyst who is a California University college professor. And there is a way that the CIA analyzes countries around the world with a set of metrics. And if you are not doing well, they will place you as destabilized or likely to collapse. The CIA analyst, independent of the CIA, used the same CIA metrics on America and showed that America was close to collapse or civil war. Specifically, what they were talking about was the concept of ethnic entrepreneurs. A leader says that our ethnic group is losing out the way things are going. Donald Trump to Caucasian Americans. That is what they were trying to say. Here's the key quote from that CIA analyst. USA drops in political stability to the lowest level since the Civil War, according to foreign policy experts. So what this is saying is, and this is covered by mainstream news, is that you have people who work for the CIA, studied other countries. They're using that analysis dispassionately and now saying, when we look at the same thing, America is the closest to civil war that it's ever been in all of American history, according to CIA analysts. That should shock the hell out of you. Now, one of the things I wanted to back that up, we had talked about that about 4 years ago. So I wrote an article in October 2018. I'll show that to you right now, basically saying the same thing. So the article's called By 2040, Democracy in America Will Be Dead by Marc Ruiz Evans. If you think the battle between coastal liberal populations, rural conservatives is bad now, it's only going to get worse. I wrote that 4 years ago. What they're talking about, or what I'm talking about here, is that there's a person called Norman Orstein who said by 2040, 70% of Americans will live in 15 states, meaning 30% of American population will choose 70 senators, and the 30% will be older, whiter, more rural, and more male than the 70%. Now, let me show you a map that gets exactly what they're talking about. So here you go. This is population distribution in the year 2040, or about 2 decades from now, according to the U.S. Census and analysts. The gray areas are low population areas. A majority of those are in the area that voted for Trump. So a majority of these low population states, which are places that voted for Trump, will own a majority of the Senate, and therefore they will be able to control all of America. So the census is saying that there's about 35 states that will have 30% of the population. So about 35 states will have 30% of the population, and they will be older, whiter, more rural, less diverse than the other 70%. So you're going to have 35 states that are just full of old white people with no diversities, no youth, no gay people, and all watching Fox News. And they're going to get really bitter and old and super white and inexposed to diversity. And even though they're only 30% of the population, they will choose 70% of the government, 70% of the senators, which means they will have control over the Senate. They can stop all legislation. They will have control over the Electoral College. They can choose whatever president they want. And with control of the Senate and the president, they now have control of the Supreme Court, which gives 30% of the population that's older, whiter, more rural, less diverse, more Fox News loving, total control over all of America. That's what this analyst was talking about here. Was you have a ethnic leader saying things are bad for our ethnic group, we need to fight back, and that's what how it's going to look. So this is the statistic. This is the statistic that they are talking about, and this is how they're saying it's coming to fruition now. Now, one of the other things they mentioned in this show was when they interviewed this professor. Here's the professor, and she works for the CIA, and she's an analyst. She says that it's, quote, crazy to say you could win a battle against the U.S. military today. So she is talking about the probability of civil war in America. She is saying it's likely, but she's also saying it's ridiculous to think anybody would seriously think military conflict in America could happen. The American military is incredibly powerful and destroys everybody. That's not true. So the American military lost to a bunch of guys with AK-47s and homemade bombs in 2006, 2007 in the Anbar province of Iraq. So you had the U.S. Marine Corps, all the American military, warplanes, CIA, strategic missile strikes, everything. And the U.S. Marine Corps said, we have effectively lost control of the Anbar province and cannot beat a bunch of guys with AK-47s. That's what they said. They got control of the Anbar province because the tribes themselves turned on al-Qaeda in Iraq and began working with the Marines. If the tribes themselves did not do that, the U.S. Marine Corps would never have been able to pacify the Anbar province and would have effectively lost in that war to a bunch of guys with AK-47s. I want to be clear. The Anbar people were not Russia or China with sophisticated missile technology and fighting a modern warfare. These were people with AK-47s and homemade bombs, and they stopped the mightiest military in the world. Don't believe me? Well, let's take a look. What's this? U.S. Naval War College Digital Commons. The U.S. Navy controls the U.S. Marine Corps organization learning in the Marine Corps, the counterinsurgency campaign in Iraq, where the U.S. Marine Corps and the Navy admit they lost to a bunch of people with AK-47s in the Anbar province in late 2006 to 2007. So when people say it's impossible to defeat the American army, what are you talking about? They also did it in Afghanistan. Again, homemade bombs and AK-47. So that's two military conflicts where the American military was not able to win and was bested. So I just want to point out, they're talking about how America is likely to enter into a civil war, but then they're also trying to tamp down the idea of saying it's ridiculous that anybody could think they could beat the U.S. military. Happened in Afghanistan, happened in Anbar. So it is not ridiculous to think that. And America's lost, the American military, as big as it is, has lost twice in recent years. That's a fact. So consider this. There's the chance of civil war is likely, according to CIA analysts, and their drawback that you don't need to worry about it because the American military can never be defeated is, in fact, not true. And the demographics that the CIA analyst is looking at to show that civil war could happen are very true and are based upon the U.S. Census that's going to say 35 states will have a tiny minority of the population and will control all three branches of the government, and they will be most likely old racist white people. That's according to the US Census. Oh, and that doesn't change till the year 2044 or about 2 decades from now, or when, as I love saying, NASA has projected to have a functional colony on the Mars. Okay, let's go to the next one. Here's the next article. Article MSNBC Congresswoman openly advocates into American democracy. Boy, does that sound horrible. Let's take a look at what they're talking about. Congressman openly advocates into American democracy on MSNBC, December 30th, 2021. Slow motion is
seditious faction, for lack of a better adjective, in American politics. One that we haven't seen in this form since, I don't know, arguably the Civil War. So help me out.
So what they're saying is that because Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, let's have a peaceful divorce because a civil war is coming. So she's been saying, let's support secession and the states breaking up so we have a peaceful divorce rather than a civil war. What they're saying is because she even mentioned those topics, she wants to destroy all of America and is a treasonous person openly advocating for insurrection. I think that's garbage, but you can think whatever you want. That's basically what they're saying about her. Let's take a look at some of the quotes that they mentioned. Now, one of the things they mentioned was U.S. member of the Congress is trying to tear the union apart, and we here all on the show are pro-union. Now, what I liked was that on the show, they were joking about how, duh, I'm pro-union. I think most of us would. They took it as a foregone conclusion that everybody would be pro-union. That's not true anymore. So that was inaccurate. Here's another thing that I didn't like was, actually, here we go. One of the things they said at 5 minutes and 42 seconds was most Republicans are not in the secession camp. And this is MSNBC, a liberal group, saying there's Civil War talk. It's Marjorie Taylor Greene. She's crazy. So Marjorie Taylor Greene is talking about Civil War possibility. She's crazy. How do we know? Because the majority of the Republicans would never back secession. Most Republicans are not in the secession camp. They literally say that at 542, and they're dead wrong. Pew Research Center, 67% of Republicans want Trump to stay in power October 2021. October 2021, 52% of Trump supporters want to secede. So a majority of the Republican Party, 2/3, likes Trump, and over half of that wants to secede. So it is not accurate to say that most Republicans are not in the secession camp. Actually, most Republicans are in the secession camp. That was a total lie by MSNBC in order to say that you don't need to take the threat of civil war very seriously. Let's show you some of those references like we like to do here. Majority of Trump voters, 52%, want to secede from the Union. There it is. So that was based upon a poll. The University of Virginia found that 52% of Trump voters want to secede from the Union. That came in October 2021. Here's the Pew Research Center. 2/3 of Republicans want Trump to retain a major role. That was actually 67%. So just wanted to point out that when MSNBC is saying you don't need to worry about civil war because most Republicans don't back secession, that is a complete and total lie based upon information that's only 1 year old from a university and from the Pew Research Center, which is the preeminent polling center for most of these issues in America. Now, one of the other things that they mentioned in this same article was you don't need to worry about secession because there's no way to separate Americans by state. Every state in this union consists of red areas and blue areas, so you don't need to worry about this talk about civil war because most Republicans don't back it. Not true. And you don't need to worry about this talk about civil war because you really can't separate any state from the union. It's full of conservative and liberals and a mixed blotch, which really makes it impossible that it could happen. That is also not true. So I'm going to cover the article that I wrote in 2019. Sorry, I'm missing an L. I can see that now. Article, Marcus Ruiz Evans, How I Vote for Calexit to Go, March 2019. Now, what you're going to see in that article that I'm going to show you right now is California could easily separate the dominant red areas from the dominant blue areas. The red control areas are only in the far north and the eastern mountains, and these are disconnected from the economy. So let me show you that right now so you can see. So again, the argument by MSNBC in this argument is no state can secede because they're too mixed together and it can't work. And here's the proof that that is wrong, which I will show you now. So here's the article, how a vote for majority Calexit would go. Now here's the thing. This dark area is where conservatives are in control. You'll notice, see the pink area? That's the population and the farmland. So here's the economic drivers, LA, the Bay. Here's most of the population in pink. There's a little bit of pink there, no pink there. That's Visalia, the city, pink in this area. That's Bakersfield City, pink in this area. And that is Victorville. So you have Victorville, Bakersfield City, and Visalia, Bakersfield, and Victorville out of all of California are populated areas that are still under conservative control. So when we look at the 2016 vote and we look at the 2018 vote, what that shows is that basically half of California is blue. It's really only the mountains in the far north that are red. So here's the 2008 Republican boundary is this light pink, as you can see. 15 years ago, it's true. A large part of the interior of California was conservative. Let's look at the 2018 election. See how this is 2020 and this is 2018. So the boundaries are receding and going in. Boundaries are receding and going in. Boundaries are receding and going in. Boundaries are massively receding and going in. So what we're showing is this was the area that in 2008 conservatives did control. This is the area that they control in 2020. So this lightly shaded area here shows the areas that they've lost control over recently. So as you can see, they're losing control of the areas and they're being pushed out to the mountains and the exterior. And one of the things I liked was, here's the economy of California. It's called an economic geography of the United States from communes to mega regions. And what it shows is most of the economy and most of the population in California is going to stay intact. There really isn't not going to lose much. Farmland will stay intact. That's support for Calexit. Again, here's the election maps, and you can see how these areas were conservative went blue versus conservative. So what they're saying is that California couldn't secede because we're so mixed up red and blue. That's not true. So the elections for the last couple of years have been going to the conservatives against the mountains, and they own the populated areas of Victorville, Visalia, and Bakersfield City until they lose future elections. That is a small fraction of the California population and the California economy, as we showed you in this map here. This is the economic geography of California. So here is the little bit of Lancaster you'd lose. Here's Bakersfield City you lose, and this little bit right here is Visalia. All of this, except for this little bit here, this little bit here, and this little bit here, all of this would stay. Most of the economy, most of the population. And here's why. You've been hearing about how people are dying to get out of California, right? Mass conservative exodus. Well, what do you think that means? The conservatives who couldn't stand California already left. The ones, I mean, when you have a bunch of people in California who are conservative saying, I hate this, I can't wait to go, but they didn't leave, why aren't they leaving? They have family or they have business and they can't. And a bunch of other people have left. You can't have it where everybody's sick and tired of California and they complain so much, but they're still here, when there's tons of them actively leaving and there's success stories in Austin and Miami. What that means is that if you were conservative and you hated California so much, you would have already gone. And if you didn't, it's not because things are going to get worse. It's because they're the worst they've ever been and you're still here, which means you're not going to leave because your business is here, your money here, your family's here, or some other reason, which means that California separated, you would still stay. because it's not bad enough for you to go, because if it was, you would already be leaving, because the climate is the easiest right now to leave, and it's the worst possible it's ever been for conservatives. So the concept that it's going to get worse and finally that'll push conservatives out once California secedes is not based upon the data. A lot of people are leaving. A lot of people are fed up. If you were that mad, you would already be gone. You can't say we're having the largest exodus ever, and you can't say it's the worst climate for business ever, and then say, but it could get worse and maybe then people will leave. That's ridiculous. So you want to talk about how people are leaving California? Fine. You want to talk about how California is the worst for conservatives ever? Fine. But that also means that if we separate, they're not really going to leave. So those Trump supporters that live in LA and the Bay Area, they're going to stay there and they're going nowhere else. And as we saw in the election maps, they're outvoted. These are voting districts. These are counties. There is no smaller unit of voting district. So you're a Trump supporter in San Francisco, you're going to be outvoted. And you're a minority of the population. So you're not going to do an armed insurrection because your neighbors are 50 times bigger than you. Secondly, if you really hated, you already left. And probably if you're a Trump supporter living in San Francisco, you're not going anywhere. And you're going to put up with it because otherwise you would have already left. So they can't actually control those areas. They can't fight back. They don't have the numbers. The places where Trump supporters in California do have the numbers to actively hold ground and be in the majority is the mountains only. And about 3 podunk towns, Visalia, downtown Bakersfield, which is not full podunk, and Victorville, Palmdale. Visalia and Palmdale are almost nothing compared to the economy. Bakersfield be significant, but it can also be turned. So just wanted to point that out. This concept that California couldn't secede because we're mixed with red and blue is completely wrong, and it is not based upon elections as they've happened over the last 15 years. All right, let's go to the next article. Give me 1 second to queue up a few things.
How badly did Kevin McCarthy?
Give me 1 more second to queue that up. 30 more seconds. Close. Okay. 1 second. Give me 1 second. Okay, here is the next article. Retired generals warn an insurrection could succeed next time. What they talk about in this article is that we are chilled to our bones at the thought of a coup succeeding next time. That comes from some retired generals. And let me show you that real quick, what they're talking about. So here's the article, December 20th, retired generals warn of an insurrection could succeed next time on CNN. 3 retired generals, they're worried about a coup and an active insurrection happening. So that's what that article talks about. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out was you have political instability in America to levels you've never seen before. You have a CIA analyst saying that America is on the backsliding democracies and is unstable or more destabilized since any point since the Civil War. You have retired generals saying they're worried about a coup actively happening in America. These are all bad signs of internal stability. So CIA analysts going, wow, it looks like America's unstable. Retired American generals saying, wow, we think America's so unstable, a coup could happen. And then on top of that, rival factions fighting for control. At the same time that this happened, America did a horrible, horrible pullout of Afghanistan. The pullout of Afghanistan under Joe Biden and Trump, if you want to argue, was so horrible that it made America look horrible on the world stage. Now, they'll try to play it off, but every country who was a rival to America was laughing at America, and all of the allied nations to America were scared that their American partner could no longer function. I'm not going to go into it, but look at the pullout of Afghanistan. Absolutely a buffoon laden event of historical proportions, as bad a PR move as the fall of Saigon with the helicopters lifting off of Vietnam. You had planes lifting off the tarmac in Afghanistan with people falling out like the Hmong people fell out during the Vietnam War. So point is this: America's a big bad military. Then they face Afghanistan. They lose to a bunch of guys with AK-47s after 20 years. Bad look. And then they leave the country with their allies falling off planes because they're just trying to get out. It's so bad that allies in America are scared that America can't do anything effectively as a world power on the world stage anymore. At the same time, U.S. military generals are saying we're worried about an active coup happening and destabilizing it. And CIA analysts are saying we're worried about an active coup coming and destabilizing America. So I want to point you out to something called the Roman Empire. When Rome fell, there were signs beforehand. They were trying to conquer this place called Germany and Britannia, England and Germany. And they just couldn't seem to control the barbarians there. They kept losing. In fact, they lost famously to Hermann the German, that was the only time in Roman history where an entire legion was wiped out. So one of the worst defeats of Rome in all of Roman history happened in Germany. At that same time, Rome was starting to come apart in cohesion. You had different generals and rich guys, basically patrons as they were called, basically controlling different parts of the Roman Empire. So Rome didn't have one leader that was super cohesive. It had like 3 or 4 that were kind of working together to keep it together, but they were also factionalized. At the same time, they're losing, so they don't have their unitary control. It's kind of like regional governors controlling it. Dissolution of the cohesion of the Roman body. At the same time, they're fighting wars abroad and they're massively losing to them. So they've always been a cohesive body the whole time. Now they're fractionalized. They've never lost massively to foreign armies. Now they are. Welcome to America. Worst possible defeat in Afghanistan America's seen in since Vietnam, and the greatest instability domestically. So when you are an empire and you are massively losing abroad in ways that are embarrassing on scales you've never seen before, and at the same time you have domestic instability on scales you've never seen before, that's exactly what it looks like when the Roman Empire fell. There you go. Okay. Losing battles abroad and unable to retain cohesion at home signaled to the entire world the empire was weak, which encouraged the barbarians to inch closer to Rome. So as Rome started to be less cohesive and as it started being defeated abroad, that told all the barbarians in the north, move closer to Rome because they're not as strong as you once thought they were, and you might be able to defeat them. That attitude and that encouragement of the barbarians moving closer to Rome finally led to the sack of Rome in 410, where they were ultimately defeated. But you could see how the conditions that led to that started maybe almost a century or 70 years earlier. All right, let's go to the next article. How close is the U.S. to a civil war? Let's take a look at this article here. Here's the article. Study finds the U.S. is entering into dangerous political territory. Again, it's the same professor, again, who's the CIA analyst saying America's moving closer to civil war than ever before. And let's cover that a little bit. So she says the U.S. is closer to civil war than any of us would like to believe. The U.S. is pretty close to being high risk of civil war. That's what the CIA analyst says. So that's pretty scary. Now, finally,
if you want to eat healthy and feel your best, you gotta try cassava.
okay. Here's the final article we're going to cover today. CNN, how dangerous talk of the Second Civil War is different than today. So let me show you that article. How dangerous talk of a second civil war is different today on CNN on January 6th, 2022. Again, they're talking about Marjorie Taylor Greene and how she's a bad person because she says that she wants to have peaceful divorce versus violent civil war.
After the victory of Joe Biden and
I want
Kamala
to point
Harris,
this out here.
we're guaranteed a 50% chance.
One of the things they focused on was there's a poll from Harvard University Institute of Politics of the youth across America that said 35% of the youth believe there's a 50% chance of a second civil war in their lifetime. So CNN took the time to say, look, 35% of the youth, according to a Harvard poll, believe there's a 50% chance of civil war. That sounds bad, but they were able to tamp it down by saying, well, that still means 2/3 of the youth don't believe there's going to be a civil war. Let's take a look at that poll. Here is the Harvard Youth poll that CNN was actually referring to. America's the 29-year Americans, 18 to 29 years old. And here's one of the things. I want to show you that. Right. So here's the question. Young Americans place the chances that they will see a second civil war in their lifetime at 35%, and one state seceding at 25%. So what they're saying is 1/3 of Americans think similar patterns hold for secession is likely. About 35% of the youth think there's a 50% chance or more that there will be a civil war or secession. That still means that 2/3 of the youth don't believe that's going to be there. And CNN really focused on that, hey, this is bad, it's not a good sign, but let's focus on 2/3 of the youth don't believe there will be a secession. Now, here's the statistic from the exact same Harvard poll that the CNN people completely left out. Only 7% of young Americans said the United States is a healthy democracy. Only 7%. So this is the youth poll that CNN pointed to. Here's the statistic they focused on. Here's what they forgot to mention. Only 7% of young adults view the United States as a healthy democracy. Around 70% of American youth don't think there will be a civil war. True. But 90% of the youth think America's fundamentally broken. So CNN focused on, hey, 70% of the youth still don't believe there will be a civil war. They forgot to mention that 93% of the youth believe America's broken and don't believe it's a functional democracy. So yeah, the youth were saying, I don't know if there's a civil war, but they were also saying, I don't think America works at all. Well, typically civil wars happen when there's a breakdown of government. So CNN is ignoring the question of, do you have faith in the government that it functions, that leads to civil wars, while talking about how a majority of the youth don't believe there's going to be a civil war. That's disingenuous and misleading. The other thing that I wanted to point out from this CNN article was they talk a lot about how the right encourages violence and believes the election was stolen in 2020. And they're correct that when you have a large political body, the right, who talks about violence and get your guns and we might have to shoot our way out, bad sign for the stability of the country. When these people believe that an election was stolen and the person elected was not the legitimate leader, also a bad sign. But here's where CNN gets it dead wrong. The left actively encouraged violence against Donald Trump. I'm not going to go into it. You can look at the multitude of people, including Kamala Harris, the vice president, who joked about shooting the president in the head. So there were lots of liberals talking about beheading the president or stomping him into the ground or shooting him or killing him or punching him in the face like Joe Biden. That's encouraging violence against a political rival. The left did that before the right got to their violent stage. Left completely forgot to mention it. Secondly, the left said the election was stolen in 2016. They said Russia stole the election. Now, the House Intelligence Committee, the Senate Intelligence Committee, the CIA, and the NSA all came out and said there's zero evidence that the Russian government flipped any votes. Did they interfere in the election? Sure. Did they try to cause turmoil? Absolutely. Zero evidence, according to everyone in the American government, that the Russians actually changed votes and switched the election significantly. They never said that happened. In fact, when they looked at it after years, there was no evidence. Now, they tried to encourage and influence the election, but there's no evidence they actually go, oh, the election was going to be 46 to 54, and we switched these 2 percentage points. No one ever said that. The left has yet to apologize for saying for years that Donald Trump was the not officially elected president and not recognizing his election. Now, I'm not saying this to pick on anybody, but I'm just pointing out, in a country where you have the left saying it's okay to be violent to the guy that was chosen and we don't recognize this election, and then you get the other half saying it's okay to be violent and we don't recognize this election, what you get is a country where nobody recognizes elections and both sides think it's okay to be violent. That's even worse than if it was just the left or the right. If it was one half, you could say the other half is the adults. Now everybody's a kid. Everybody's saying be violent. Everybody's saying I don't recognize elections. That's even worse than anything CNN was talking about. One of the other things that they mentioned that I have to disagree with was they said that it is the right, and is the fact that the right has called into question this election that has ruined public trust in government. That is dead wrong. So I'm going to show you this article, Pew Research Center, Public Trust in Government, May 2021. And it says Americans have had the lowest faith in government since the 1960s, since 2007, before Obama. It is not because of Trump. So yes, things are bad. But the conservatives calling into question an election and threatening violence is not what caused Americans to lose faith in government. They've already lost faith in government since before Obama was elected, starting in the George W. Bush administration, throughout 2 terms of the Obama administration, and out throughout a term of the Trump administration, and into 2 years of the Biden administration. That's 4 presidencies that Americans have lost faith in government. Let's show you that statistic, which contradicts what the news was saying. Here you go. Public trust in government, 1958. So before the 60s to 2021. Here it is. Lowest, and it basically stays low until you start to see a peak around here. So July 2017. So I'll move the cursor out. You can see this is kind of a straight line here, and then it's high here in 2001, and then it drops to a low by 2007. So here was the high, 1964. It drops, then it drops. It kind of plateaus roughly at this level. It actually picks up around 2001, but then it drops down to 2007. July 9, 2007, where it basically plateaus. This is the George W. Bush era, Obama, Trump, and Biden. But what that also means is that the faith in the government was the lowest it's been since the 1960s, since 2007, or 8 years before Trump was ever elected. So Americans have lost faith in their government for a very long time. And they are already accusing the other side of violence and not recognizing elections when they do the same thing themselves. That is the coverage of the news on the topic of national divorce right now. You have seen the sources. We've also given you the counter sources to prove that out. We pointed out the statistics. You can make up your own mind. We believe this subject is relevant because we've been covering this for about 10 to 12 years, and the topic only gets more popular and normative each year. Let's take a look at the comments. If they're relevant, we will post them. As in Calexit being the only option. This is why marketing producer in the background. Okay, no real relevant comments, but thanks. So appreciate it. Hope you found the information good. Again, I'm your host, Marc Ruiz Evans. This is National Divorce Talk Raw, where we give you the information, the sources, the counter sources, and let you make up your information, your mind, in a way that the mainstream news just won't do. You will only find it here. Thank you very much. And try to find some way to laugh today if you can, because if you ain't laughing, you're crying. Thank you.